Hello everybody, Jake your resident content cowboy here. Yeehaw! It's Monday. On Mondays we do tier lists, and on Wednesdays we wear pink.
Oh my god, I love your skirt. Where did you get it?
It was my mom's in the 80s.
Vintage. So adorable.
Thanks.
That is the ugliest effing skirt I've ever seen.
We just recently had a balance change in Pokemon Unite, so I'm going to be going over every single Pokemon in the game and where I think they land now that that change has happened. We had quite a few nerfs and quite a few buffs for some very popular Pokemon. Some definitely missed that nerf, and we'll talk about that here in 1 second. As always with these type of tier lists, I'm giving you a broad look at how all of these Pokemon perform in 99% of the games that you play. Solo, duo, trio, even most 5 stacks on the ladder. What this is not going to contain is full top rank competitive gameplay. That is a very, very small niche for the game, and I don't usually make tier lists based around that unless I've been watching a lot of competitive play. This is for essentially all of us who play the game who are not competing at the world's level right now. This tier list should encompass about 99% of the player base. Basically, solo, duo, trio, even up to 5 stacks in the ranked ladder. The only thing this wouldn't really cover is competitive play through the tournament mode, which is slightly different. But for just about everybody else, this is where these Pokemon fall on this list. And as always, if a Pokemon I rate high is something that you're not good with, I would stay away from it. And if there's something I rate low that you're very, very good with, very competent, and you can help your team win games, then that's great. More power to you. I encourage you to play what you like and what you are good with, and whatever you are able to contribute best to your team with. Let's take a look at our tiers for the week. We have our God tier. We're only gonna have 1 Pokemon in our God tier. We're not friggin' Norse around here. We have our S tier. These are Pokemon that are insanely good, essentially overpowered and kind of broken inside the game. We have our A+ tier. These are Pokemon that are very, very close, extremely solid choices. We have our A tier. These are Pokemon that are very, very strong, definitely above average, great choices. We have our B tier. And, yeah. I don't know. I don't know what to say at this point, but, we still got the B tier. I know how much that hurts, because it hurts me every time. We have our C tier, and then we also have our D tier, our Decidueye Memorial tier. This is a tier named after Decidueye. Once it released, it was very, very bad, and it had its own tier named after it. Now it no longer sits in that tier, but we will always remember Release Decidueye. So let's get into this. I want to hear your thoughts. Like, comment, subscribe. I am putting out tier lists and videos all the time, and I would love to have you be a subscriber. Let's start with our Speedsters right here. This is a class that was not really changed at all with the recent update. A few of them very good, a few of them very not so good. I'm pulling them all up onto our tier list right now so that we can talk about them. Let's start with our 2 very, very powerful Speedsters. That is Dodrio and Zoroark. I think both of these Pokemon are actually in our A+ tier. They both almost make it into the S tier. The only thing about them is they are pretty counterable, and as a speedster, they are quite squishy. However, both of these Pokemon in different ways are excellent. You can play them in the central area, or you can play them in the top or bottom path, and they provide a ton of value for your team. Both of their movesets are actually pretty good right now. I still mostly like Feint on Zoroark, but I've been seeing more and more Night Slash players. Zoroark got some nice Battle Pass buffs recently, and Dodrio's just been great since release. Now both Drill Peck and Tri Attack are really solid. I think both of these Pokemon will actually be hurt once Umbreon hits the game very soon, but for now, I would say A+ is a very solid place to put these Pokemon. Really, really good, but there is enough counterplay that makes it so that I don't throw them up into the S tier. For the rest of our Speedsters, I would say they are varying levels of okay, and they're all carries, but they're not amazing. The one I have to put at the bottom is Zeraora. Again, with all of these Pokemon, they are carry Pokemon, and what that means is they're the kind of Pokemon that can get a lot of experience, do a lot of damage, wipe out multiple members of the enemy team. You would expect that all of these Pokemon can do this. However, not all of them are doing this at a super high level right now. I would say Gengar and Absol are both probably in the C tier, probably. You could say that Talon is one of the lower tier Pokemon Pokemon in the game, I am actually going to move Talon into our B tier this week, and I could be slightly off on this, but I don't think I am. The only reason Talon is here is because Fly Talonflame is an excellent counter for Glaceon, a Pokemon that recently got buffed and you're seeing in a ton of matches right here. You could still say Talon is C, but I do think Fly Talonflame being a very strong counter is a reason enough to move it out of our C tier and up to our B tier. To be honest, I think all of these speedsters besides Dodrio and Zoroark could use some sort of buff, but as always with these Pokemon, they are just so close to being amazing. I swear to you, you change a little bit on any of these and they are all of a sudden broken. One of, if not the most difficult classes to, apparently difficult words to say, and difficult classes inside the game to balance. This battle type, the speedster battle type, is extremely difficult because if it's just a little more powerful, it's broken, it KOs everyone too fast, and if it's just a little weaker, it's just not strong enough and doesn't do enough. In fact, if looking at these, I could see an argument for moving Gengar down in some respects, but I think in uncoordinated play, you will still see some stellar Gengars. In general, Gengar, Absol, Zeraora, even Talon, not doing amazing inside this meta, while Dodrio and Zoroark are doing very, very well. Now that we've talked about our speedsters, let's move on to our defenders for a little bit. Tanky Pokemon that do really well, not only at dishing out damage, which is kind of surprising for their class, right? But also do very well at taking damage, displacing the enemy. You definitely want to have one, if not two of these on your team at some times. So let's take a look at some of our defenders and see where they fall on our tier list today. I'll start with Slowbro right here. I think Slowbro is still a top tier choice inside of Pokemon Unite. One of the best defenders, one of the best Pokemon. It's good early, it's good late, its early game is amazing. Water Gun has incredible secure. It does enough damage to last hit very, very well. At the same time, you know, its end game with Amnesia or even Telekinesis, you have a ton of health recovery. Its Unite move, one of the best in the game, without question, a top tier defender, and I think still pretty broken. You would probably still consider this the best defender in Unite at its job. It feels like the exact thing you want from a tanky defender type Pokemon. Mamoswine. I think Mamoswine is a solid choice, especially for most of the game. Again, outside of full-on competitive play. The problem with full-on competitive play and looking at a Pokemon like Mamoswine is there are a few defenders that just get higher priority. They're just a little bit better, and you're not going to see Mamoswine played too much. I think it is still a very, very solid choice. Good early. It also has nice moves to deal with all of the EVs inside the game. Icicle Crash is a long-range move which can break their passives, which is really, really cool. In general, I think most players are going to have a good time with the Swine. Blastoise. I'm going to take Blastoise. I think it was in our A+ tier last time I did a tier list. I'm going to move it down to A. Still really good. Both of its builds strong. I think it maybe doesn't have as much power as it used to, and the big reason for that, and this is kind of with all defenders right now, is that the special attackers are so incredibly good that they can kind of melt through some of these tanks, and because of that, I think Blastoise loses a little bit of value. There are also a couple tanks that I think are better than Blastoise right now. That being said, really strong. Anything in our A tier is very, very good. Rapid Spin might edge it out a little bit, but I think a big problem with Rapid Spin is there's another Pokemon that is essentially Rapid Spin Blastoise. It's different, but it's essentially Rapid Spin Blastoise in some ways, and it's just better. And let's talk about that right now. That Pokemon is Lapras. I think Lapras still sits in our S tier. Insanely good. Doesn't need to evolve, which is a massive advantage. Its Water Pulse, I would say, is still the build for it, but you can play Perish Song. I just don't think Perish Song is anywhere close to as good. Water Pulse giving you a boosted attack, having multiple hits on it, having an insanely low cooldown. Even though it got nerfed, I would still say Lapras sits up in our S tier. And the nice thing about a Pokemon like Lapras is you don't need the central area with it at all. You get plenty of experience in Path. You're strong, you're tanky, your Unite move's awesome. Lapras is in just such a great spot inside the game. Trevenant, I would say I'm going to put into our A+ tier here. It feels like it does the job of Slowbro-ish, Lapras ish, but a little worse. It has some nice stuns, nice displacement, still very powerful, very tanky. I like it better than Mamoswine and Blastoise inside this beta just because of how good it is with Wood Hammer. That being said, you could also play Curse on this Pokemon. I just don't think you would want to, given how good Wood Hammer is. It's crazy good. The stuns are amazing. The ability to kind of hit your opponents very quickly because of how fast its windup is now. I just think Trevenant is still a top tier choice inside the game. Goodra, moving up a few spots for me. I'm moving it up to our A tier right now. Really nice buffs on Goodra. Dragon Pulse now actually a much more viable build because you get more healing out of it. And its Unite move coming up more often I think is really solid. You actually could play this Pokemon in the central area. The biggest problem with Goodra is it needs a lot of experience, but you can play it in Path once you start to understand your Secure with Tackle and sort of your Shield together. Once you understand that combo of dashing in and popping your shield, getting that last hit, I think you're actually in a pretty great place with it. I have had so much more fun with Goodra since these buffs and since I kind of run attack speed on it, because I just love attack speed on this Pokemon. Actually doing really well right now. Its win rate, from what I saw last time I looked, is still pretty low. I think it's going to take people a little while with this Pokemon. I also think it's a difficult Pokemon to use, to be fair, but I would say it's doing pretty well right now. Greedent. I'm going to put our Greedent up in our A tier as well. A completely different Pokemon from every other defender we've talked about. This is a harasser tank, and doing that job, it still does very, very well. It's one of the most difficult Pokemon to play. It's like top tier difficult Pokemon to play. However, if you know how to play Greedent, it's very, very useful for your team. It doesn't really fill the role of main defender though. So I would say if your team doesn't have a defender, it's not a first choice for me. If my team doesn't have a defender, you know, Lapras, Slowbro, Trevenant, even, you know, down into Mamo, Snorlax, which we'll talk about in a sec. Those are more of the defendery choices. This is in a different world. This is harasser tank world, and Greedent's living in it and having a great time. In that role, very good. Snorlax, another good Pokemon. I think I'm going to put it B. Here's the thing about Snorlax. In competitive play, I think this would be higher. In non-competitive play, I think it's probably the tank with the most, that is the most team reliant, I guess is the way to look at it here. So I still think it's very, very good. But if I were to look at most everyone playing this game, I think they would do better with the other defenders on this list that I've put up there so far than they would with Snorlax. I just think it's very, very team reliant. That's the only reason I'm putting it a tier lower. That being said, it's a great tank, especially if you're just learning how to sort of tank and how to provide that value for your team. Heavy Slam and Block is amazing. You've also got the Heavy Slam Yawn build that you're seeing more and more of. I'm not in love with it just because I think Block is so good. And then the Flail build kind of puts us into a completely different category as sort of this Bruiser. Bruisers aren't doing extremely well inside the game right now just because of all the special attack. In general, good Pokemon, strong tank, but I actually think you're going to get hurt playing this solo, duo, trio compared to some of the other tanks. Our next defender is Crustle, and I need to put Crustle down here in our bottom tier just for the sake of saying this Pokemon needs some buffs. I recognize you can do better than D tier when it comes to Crustle. I actually really love this Pokemon. It just needs some love. It needs some buffs. It needs some changes. It's too weak right now. It's beaten by so many other choices. That being said, I like all of the Crustle builds. I just think they need to give this Pokemon another look. They need to do something to it. In general, it's in a very weird spot in this meta. Shell Smash taking away all your defenses. It felt like with less powerful Pokemon, with less varied Pokemon in general, when the game first came out, this had more value. Now, I think Crustle's just not doing super well in this meta, and I would love to see this Pokemon get some buffs. Moving on to our supporters, a category that is extremely good in Unite. There really isn't a bad supporter on the list. All of them are varying degrees of very good, and we'll talk about them here. Let's start with Eldegoss, a Pokemon that I think is incredible, especially for newer players. Eldegoss Its auto attacking is amazing. All of its builds are doing well right now. An awesome Pokemon to have on your team. Sometimes the healing feels a little light, but then other times it really doesn't at all. It's not as focused on healing as something like Blissey and Clefable, but the supporters are just so valuable inside of a game of Unite. If you look at two teams, and one team has a supporter on it and the other team just has another attacker in that spot, I think the team with the supporter is going to win much more often. Of course, all of these are a little team reliant, but that's to be expected with being a supporter. In general, just as a class, they are kind of killing it inside the game right now. Let's put some more up here. Comfey. Comfey got some nerfs recently, but I still think it's extremely solid. It's maybe not S tier. For the longest time I was putting Comfey in our God tier, but they actually gave it sizable nerfs across the board, and I've seen it have less impact lately. Still a very good Pokemon, but I feel like maybe for a little bit it is actually not the most broken thing inside the game, which is so wonderful, but in general still very good. Let's move on to maybe kind of a different one. I'm gonna move on to Wigglytuff right here. I think Wigglytuff kind of falls in line, possibly closer to our B tier, maybe closer to our A tier. It's actually a decently solid tank. It just feels like it doesn't fully have a place inside the game right now. I think you could still get some buffs to this Pokemon, and it would probably benefit quite a bit from them. It's a solid tank. It's kind of right here with Snorlax in my opinion. It's a solid tank, and especially early, it's really good, but I don't know, it's been missing something for a while. Maybe it's Unite move, the shields need to be bigger, I'm not sure. But this is another Pokemon that I do feel like if they gave it a nice little pass of buffs, it could be all of a sudden very meta. Let's talk about a weird Pokemon, and that is Sableye. I don't even really know what to say about Sableye, except what it does is very specifically it kind of reminds me of Greedent. It's a weird harasser, stun Pokemon, and it's so good at its job. But this Pokemon, like Greedent, I feel like doesn't really fill its role. So if your team only has one support and it's Sableye, you might be a little disappointed that you don't have another supporter that kind of sets up more of a recovery aspect for your team. Kind of the same thing with Wiggly. If that's your one support, well, that's really more of a tank. And Sableye, it's really more of a harasser specific type Pokemon. From my experience lately, I've noticed that it feels like you can have sort of one of these weirdo Pokemon, Sableye, Greedent, something like that, because you start to stack multiple Pokemon in sort of this weird harasser, pseudo supporty, stun type role. I feel like you start to run into some issues in some of the fights. Clefable, very good. Healing's amazing. Follow Me, great. Gravity, a huge counter to a few Pokemon inside the meta. Zoroark, Scizor, which just got some buffs. Water Bear. I mean, this is just a really solid Pokemon right now. Same thing with Blissey. The heals are amazing. The Unite move's amazing. Safeguard is still very powerful. Another great Pokemon, and I have to put Hoopa up here too. Hoopa's kind of right here with Eldegoss. Not that I'm ranking them against each other, I'm just putting them near each other just to illustrate that they're kind of similar in role, it feels like. All of the supporters are so freaking good inside the game. I think Mime, I'd put Mime either B or A. You know, it's somewhere in here. It's still powerful, but it's different, right? Mr. Mime is another one of those Pokemon where you go, yeah, it's a supporter, but it's not. It's essentially kind of a defender that does a lot of damage in a weird way. So I would say it's kind of here or here. The only reason I'm going to put it maybe A, I dropped it down last tier list. I really can't decide where it hangs out here. It's like right in this realm. The only reason I'm going to keep it A right now is just looking at our tier list right here. I think it does better damage output than both Snorlax and Wigglytuff, and that's going to put it into a position to carry more games. So solo, you're probably going to get a little more mileage out of it, but in general, it's kind of right here in this realm. And there are our supporters. Let's move on to our all-rounders right here, and I'll just start up by throwing Zacian right up into our S tier. This Pokemon is still insanely good. It has not received the nerfs that we expected it to get. I actually think another round of not even heavy, but like kind of like medium nerfs to this Pokemon, and it would be in a much more reasonable place. The agility nerf was a really nice one, but in general, they still need to do something to Zacian. It's without question one of the best Pokemon inside the game, especially if it's in the hands of a good player. Like, you often see it in the hands of a bad player. In the hands of a good player, freaking watch out. Charizard. I'm gonna put Charizard up into our A tier right here. Maybe even A+. Charizard's really good right now. The buffs they gave it are solid. They gave them a little while back, and I've just been singing Char's praises because Char is definitely back. A very, very strong choice in the game right now. Another Pokemon that got buffs, at this point it's actually quite a while back, but they're really solid, is Garchomp. I think Garchomp does really well as an all-rounder pick. In general, though, I have to say, the all-rounders are hurting a little bit inside this meta because of some of our special attackers, which we will talk about very soon. I still think Char and Garchomp doing very well. I'll throw another one up there in the A tier, and that's Machamp. Machamp is great. Its ability to engage and disengage inside of combat is really, really strong. Dynamic Punch is just so incredibly powerful as a tool to reposition yourself, and then its Unite move is amazing. I think Machamp is still doing very, very well. Also has a really good early phase too. Karate Chop is just so good. Some of our other all-rounders are kind of in weird positions here, so let's go through them a bit. Aegislash is fine. I kind of think Aegislash is maybe C tier. Maybe it's B. You don't see this Pokemon played a lot right now, and it doesn't feel like it's performing extremely well into some of our special attackers and some of our tankier Pokemon. Just feels like it's kind of getting shut down a little bit. They nerfed it a while back. I think you could actually slightly buff this Pokemon. It would probably be good to get some Aegislash buffs. Zarina. I have to put Zarina into our lowest tier. I do not think Zarina is in a good spot in this game at all. If you're cracked on Zarina, I know that you can provide value to your team. I'm not saying you can't, but even if you're a Zarina lover, you know, this is one of your favorite Pokemon, you have to admit that this thing just does not feel like Zarina right now. This Pokemon definitely needs some love. Let's see. Azumarill, it's fine. It's fine. I don't know. It's just fine. It's okay. B, maybe. C, maybe. I don't know. It's just so outclassed. Here's the problem. You have Azumarill on one side, and on the other side, let's just put it up on the board, you have Urshifu. So I'm going to put Rapid Strike back up into the S tier. Now that Comfey is nerfed, I actually think in some ways that raises the viability of a level 5 Urshifu because you're not necessarily playing into a Comfey on the other side. You could put this A+. I don't know. I think S is a reasonable place to put it. I'm going to put the Single Strike into A+. I think both of these builds are very good, but with less Comfey on the board, it just gives you more opportunities to kind of dance around and make things happen. I'm going to put Surging Strikes into my S tier right now. Single Strike into my A+. I think both Urshifu builds are unbelievable. And that just ties back into what I was talking about with Azumarill. When you're looking at Pokemon inside this game, the whole point of a tier list is essentially to rank these Pokemon against each other. If there was only one Pokemon in the game, I don't know, where do you rank it? Top? Bottom? It's all relevant based on the other Pokemon options that are in the game. And Urshifu being another all-rounder option, Zacian being another all-rounder option, it just makes some of these all-rounders just not look too good at all. And I think Azumarill is in that spot. Dragonite. Dragonite's a weird one. I also am going to put it C. Maybe you could say it's B. It's somewhere in this realm. It's not terrible, right? But it's not amazing either. I think there's actually some decent play to the Outrage build. I like playing the Outrage build right now. But in general, I don't think Dragonite's doing amazing. It could probably use a small buff or something like that. Maybe I'd say it's B. I just think it also doesn't get played a lot. It reminds me of Aegislash in that respect. I don't see a lot of people playing this Pokemon. Scyther is probably middle of the road, probably a B tier Pokemon here for Scyther. Very much a speedster. Its stats are all speedster. If you decide to stay in the Scyther line, you are playing a speedster. But I don't know. I'm also not in love with it. It's fine. It's middle of the road. It's a carry. It carries pretty strong. We'll talk about Scissor here right now. Why don't we? Scissor got some really nice buffs. However, I think Scissor does not play well in this meta. I really don't. Nice buffs, It definitely jumped up in win rate. I don't think Scissor is amazing inside this meta. I would say it has gone from being one of the absolute worst Pokemon in the game to a B, maybe A. I need more time with it, maybe A. But I actually just don't think it plays well into a lot of the dominant forces inside the game. It's set up to fight into Pokemon that are attack based, essentially. So it has the ability now to increase its defenses, but it doesn't increase its special defenses. If they gave the ability to increase its defense and special defense, I don't know how that would affect things, but this thing could be much, much better. I would wager we're going to see more Scissor buffs, especially with a battle pass coming out for this Pokemon soon. It's just still not meta, in my opinion. Competitive wise, depending on what you see on the enemy team, you might find some really nice spots for it, but I don't think it performs that well, really, at all. And this is going to be controversial. I think Buzzwole does way better than its win rate says. It's a very high skill Pokemon, but I think Buzzwole actually still does very well just because its displacement is amazing with Superpower and Smackdown. I just think this Pokemon actually performs the job of this. It's weird. It kind of reminds me of another one of these almost harasser type Pokemon, with the added benefit of just being so incredibly good early. Its last hit potential is amazing. Its win rate doesn't really reflect it, and I just think people need to, no offense, but get good with this Pokemon. Lucario. This is the first time I'm going to move Lucario down to the B tier, and the only reason I'm doing this is simply because of this Pokemon's win rate getting lower and lower and lower. But mark my words, Lucario is better than its win rate shows. I actually think this Pokemon might slightly be better than the B tier right here, but I can't deny the fact that it's struggling right now, and there might be a couple specific reasons for that. It definitely feels like a worse version at times of the Single Strike Urshifu, and then the Extreme Speed build is just very, very difficult to pull off. We're gonna have to see if this Pokemon jumps up a bit, if people kind of pick it up again. I do think it's a solid choice, but right now, for whatever reason, Lucario is just not winning games, so I'll give it to the game a little bit there. T-Tar is C. It's tough. It's rough. It feels like Tyranitar does not play well into this meta. Pokemon just stay at such extreme range. It takes so long to get online. It's so tough. Again, when you are a multi-stage evolution Pokemon, and then you have a Pokemon like Zacian, who doesn't need to evolve at all, is good at level 0, it really makes Tyranitar worse. It makes Tyranitar worse that another Pokemon is so much better, so much faster, and even when Tyranitar gets to its end game, it's not like it's so much better than all of these other Pokemon. It's in a weird spot right now, for sure. I don't love Tyranitar's spot inside the meta. In fact, a lot of the Allrounders are kind of in a precarious situation inside this meta because they don't play that well into some of the special attackers, and they also are not Rapid Strike Urshifu or Zacian. Let's move on to our final category, which is our attackers. Quite a few attackers got some nice buffs in this recent patch. So let's start going through some of these Pokemon. Here's an interesting one. For the first time, I'm going to put Espeon in the A+ tier instead of S. I could be wrong about this. I could be wrong about it. But I actually think there are a couple reasons this Pokemon is being moved down. First off, it got a nerf. Great, it probably needed it. Second, there are actually a few Pokemon vying for its job right now. I'm going to put one of them up right here. I might be wrong, but I think Alolan Ninetales Blizzard build is kind of nuts right now. Like, honestly, I think this Pokemon's crushing it inside the game. I talked about this many times. I talk about this all the time. Some of these Pokemon are just a few buffs away from being extremely viable. And I think that's exactly what happened with Alolan Ninetales. I did not think it would be this high on my tier list, but every time I play it, I'm having stellar results. And I'm seeing other players always having stellar results. And I think at some point, you just have to go, well, wow, I guess this Pokemon really is this good right now. Blizzard, Avalanche, this combo together. They're on the same cooldown right now. The slow is much better inside of it. Your Unite move is on a better cooldown. I really think Alolan Ninetales is in a great position inside this meta, and I think it competes directly with Espeon for the same role. They do things a little differently, but I think they're both doing very, very well. A+ tier for both of these Pokemon. Let's talk about some more of our mages right here while we're on the subject. I would still say Delphox is an A+ tier Pokemon. Its Unite move's insane. It gets it every 2 seconds. Both Delphox builds are seeing play and doing well. Another mage that, well, I'm going to leave that one out of the mage conversation here. Where's Gardy? I think Gardevoir is an A tier choice. A little under Delphox in my opinion, but still very, very good. Gardevoir is a solid mage. The only difference, I think, between these two, Delphox has better mobility. That's a big plus. And I think Delphox's Unite move, easier to provide value for the team with. However, when you land Gardy's, it's just amazing. Another mage here that I think is doing very well is Chandelure. Chandelure might even be A+. It's right there. All these special attackers, Slick Spoon basically, is just doing everything inside the game right now. Overheat is the build for Chandelure. It also got some nice bug fixes, so it's not the loudest thing in the world recently, which is pretty cool. And I've heard, I would love to hear from you in the comments if this is true. I've heard that the bug where your boosted attack won't trigger anymore, I've heard that's gone away. Please let me know, anyone in the comments, if you've not seen it pop up. Also, if you still have seen it since the recent update, I would love to know. Please let me know. I have not seen it since the recent update. Any other mages? Yeah, Mew. I think Mew I'm going to put up in the A+ tier as well. Mew feels like it's still kind of S, especially in the hands of a top tier player. It's kind of hard to pull it out of the S tier, I gotta be honest, but I think there are just so many good mages right now. They all kind of fall together in this realm. They remind me of the supporters in that sense, where it's like, yeah, these are all really amazing Pokemon. Mew's a little different, very, very slippery. It's Mew. It's so good. I'm going to put it up in our A+. Really solid place for Mew to be in the game right now. And those are mainly our mages. We didn't talk about Pikachu. Pikachu and Alolan Ninetales sort of fill the same role as a support attacker, except the Blizzard Avalanche build is more of sort of our one-shot damaging mage build. I'm going to put Pikachu in the B tier. I think Pikachu is still doing okay, but it's a very specific job. I think Pikachu is mostly a support attacker. Your mentality is not necessarily that you're carrying, even though sometimes you can do some really good damage, especially with its Unite move, comboing that. But a lot of time you're stunning the enemy, you're making sure that your team can get the KOs, you're playing at extreme range. I think Pikachu's okay, but Pikachu could kind of use the Alolan Ninetales treatment. Like a nice little round of buffs for it would be really good. Our next sort of two Pokemon that I'm going to talk about are in a weird position here. There's Cramorant and Venusaur. They're both okay. So Cramorant has a mage build that's fine. It's not that great. That's Surf Hurricane. But Cramorant's Dive Air Slash is a top tier build. It's an A+ tier build. It's extremely good. Very weird. High skill ceiling, meaning you've got to be very skilled to play it well, but it's still extremely good. And you can dance around some of the more difficult Pokemon in the meta. You can break an Urshifu's ankles if you're playing right with Dive Cram. Just a very tough build, but also very powerful. Venusaur has Solar Beam Sludge Bomb, which is sort of its version of a mage build, right? And then it also has Petal Dance Giga Drain. I think Petal Dance Giga Drain feels like probably an A. Solar Beam, if you're playing it well, I think it's kind of close, even though I think it's harder to get value out of that build than it is with, say, pretty much any of the attackers above it, right? Espeon, Ninetales, Delphox, like all of these do better, I think, than Solar Beam Venusaur. But Giga Drain Petal Dance, still very, very good. Having self-sustain in a game where you can't always count on your allies is just so incredibly powerful. So that's why I have Venusaur in my A tier right here. Sylveon, another interesting Pokemon. I still think, as in all the EVs are doing very well. Sylveon, for a little while, probably is maybe the least dominant EV, but still very good. Pretty tanky for one of the evolutions, and both of its builds are solid, which is why I'm putting it up in our A tier. And now we've got our auto attackers, and we have Glaceon. So let's talk about Glaceon right now, because we were just talking about the EVs. Glaceon here is an S tier choice. Glaceon received a buff to its Icicle Spear build. It received a buff to its Icicle Spear build in kind of every way. So it not only is Ice Shard buffed, but Icicle Spears, but it's just really strong buffs for Glaceon, and that's definitely putting it up in our S tier. The rip on this Pokemon, the amount of damage it does to enemies and to objectives is just pretty wild right now. These were huge Glaceon buffs that I don't think anyone expected. And now we have our auto attackers here. Greninja, Decidueye, Duraludon, Dragapult, and Cinderace. Cinderace recently got some buffs. I'm going to move it up to our A tier for those buffs. I think I've been having Cinderace hang out in our B tier. Its Unite move being unstoppable is probably the biggest buff it got, even though Pyro Ball is a really nice buff. I still am not seeing a ton of value out of Feint. I just think it's really hard to not give yourself a move that lets you reposition yourself. Feels like it has more value than a move that lets you sort of negate damage for a moment, but in the hands of the right player, I could be wrong about that. And now if we take a look at the rest of our auto attackers, I think Cinderace and Greninja are almost directly comparable. I have to put Greninja below Cinderace right now. I think Greninja could kind of use something like Cindergot if you want to have Greninja be as high as Cinderace is on our tier list. Decent Pokemon, strong carry in the right hands. I just think Cinder outclasses it. Decidueye is a weird one, very punishable, but also very good in the right hands. I'm going to put it into our A tier because if you are on a roll and you're landing your Spirit Shackles, you're just a very different type of Pokemon on the battlefield. But again, very punishable. One of the toughest things about Decidueye is it doesn't have enough mobility, and your enemies are aware of that and they want to take you down. Our next two attackers, all right. So this is going to be one of my most controversial placements on this tier list is coming up here. I'm gonna put Dragapult, by the way, in our A tier as well. I think it's really good. Its win rate's consistent, and it has really good last hitting and secure with its Unite move, which is up, you know, essentially all the time. I really like Dragapult right now. I think it's doing very well. And maybe the most controversial, I'm putting Duraludon up into our A+ tier. Look, the thing about this Pokemon is it might not be the most exciting Pokemon sometimes. It just wins games. Like, the fact of the matter is Duraludon wins games, and it doesn't need central area. It's like the only attacker on this list that, you know, our AD carry attackers that doesn't really want central area. Decidueye kind of makes its way into there too, especially because it's a decent anti-stacker, but it never needs to evolve. It gets good at level 5, and it wins games. Duraludon is a game-winning Pokemon. So there we go. Those are all of our attackers. And now it is time to announce our God tier Pokemon of the week. I always wonder, can you guess it? I really want to know. Leave the comments in the comments right now before I move the Pokemon up there. Do you know what it is? I'll give you 1 second here. I'll give you 1 second while I drink this water and look into the camera. There's your time. I hope you left your comment. Let's find out if you were right. Our God tier Pokemon of the week is Glaceon. It is Glaceon. This thing is nuts. I don't know what they did. I don't know what they did with this Pokemon. It's insane. I think in some ways it's less punishable than Lapras, Zacian. More punishable than Lapras, Zacian, or Shifu. But the buffs to this thing are just bananas. B-A-N-A-N-A-S. These buffs are bananas. B-A-N-A-N-A-S. God tier for sure. I think Glaceon is just crazy good right now. Crazy good. There's our tier list for the week. I hope you enjoyed that. And now this. Obviously, Comfey is not doing well. It's just terrible right now. The buffs absolutely gutted this Pokemon, and then of course we have Scizor. The Battle Pass buffs to this it's broken. It's completely broken. Once again, they've broken the game just because a Pokemon has received a Battle Pass. If you're not playing Scizor right now, you're basically asking for a loss. So I hate to end the tier list on a down note, but that's how it's gonna end. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I love you all very much. I'll see y'all next time.